Welcome, everyone. My name is Stella, and thank you for tuning in to Bibi and Yaya, where you will hear real-life stories which people have written to us, detailing their life experiences, feelings, emotions, and reactions along the way. The people who write into us share their stories in hopes of connecting with others who may be able to give advice, such as yourself. Please share your comments, thoughts, and solutions below for each life story. Here on Bibi and Yaya, we will also share our opinions with the hopes that we can help those who share their stories with us. If you have a story to tell, please send us an email in the description box below. And don't forget to like Bibi and Yaya by hitting the thumbs up button and subscribing to this channel so you can stay up to date with these very personal stories. And by subscribing, it helps us to bring you new life stories and adventures every week. Today's story is about a man named Stewart who battled living on the streets. He was homeless. But he was a gifted artist and put his work to good use to get off the streets. However, along the way he met someone who may have destroyed his goals. But with his fortitude and good thinking, Stewart was able to overcome the obstacles placed before him. He eventually made a better life for himself, but it was not always an easy task. So now let's hear Stewart's story. Dear Stella, when I was homeless, I walked around the city instead of staying in one place too long. I collected cans and bottles that I could get a little money for, and sometimes I got lucky enough to find something sharp so I could cut my shaggy hair. One night, I was taking a walk to the spot where I usually slept, but there were a couple of teenagers messing around there. They were painting stuff on the wall. I knew I looked quite scary, and they didn't know I was only a few years older than them. I started running full speed at them and waving my arms like crazy, shouting incoherencies. I laughed when I saw their terrified faces as they ran off, but I noticed they left their paint cans behind. There was spray paint on my wall, and it was terrible graffiti. I mean terrible, because it looked like a 2-year-old had done it. I wasn't really tired that night, so I thought I might as well make use of my new spray paint. I started painting over the terrible graffiti and realized I was actually not bad at it. It looked much better than what the teenagers had done. I painted and painted with only a flickering lamppost illuminating the wall. And then I couldn't stop yawning. I shoved the spray cans in my bag and lay down on the least dirty part of the floor to sleep. It became a habit of mine to paint. After a few days, I had covered the entire wall of the alley where I slept with paint. It was a huge mural painted to look like a portal to paradise. I was walking around the day after I finished it when I saw some people taking pictures of it, and they were taking pictures of themselves in front of it. I guess they liked it. This went on for some time, and people apparently liked my art. I like making people happy and making our city look better, so I started painting in other places as well, but anonymously, of course. I filled the city with as many of my murals as I could, and people seemed to love them. Some days I couldn't paint because my cans were empty, but I scavenged for more and kept painting. One night, I found a bunch of perfectly good cans under a great wall. It was even white, which made the colors pop even more. I started painting, and when I was about halfway done, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Damn! I thought the police had caught me. I turned around and saw a man. He looked like he was in his 20s, like me. But he didn't look homeless, unlike me. "Hey, I'm Mike," he said. I shook his hand and said, "I'm Stewart." He pointed at the empty spray cans and said, "I see you liked my spray paint." Ah, so they were his. I started apologizing for using them, saying I didn't know they belonged to someone, but he said he left them there for me. Mike started explaining how he was a struggling artist. He painted and painted, but nobody bought his artwork. He wanted to strike a deal with me. He said he'd buy me all the paint and other art supplies I needed, and that he could sell my art. He told me he'd be the face of the business since he was so charismatic, and I would get to paint whatever I wanted, and we'd split the money 50-50. Now, I realize it wasn't that good a deal, but back then, I was homeless and desperate to get off the streets. So I shook his hand and made the deal with the devil. After 3 months, I was settled well into a small studio apartment, which Mike found for me. Rent was pretty good, and I had more than enough space. My apartment was full of canvases and sculptures, and I was proud of each and every one of them. First thing Mike did after we made the deal was drag me to a barber where he had them shave off my entire beard and cut my hair short. I barely recognized myself. I looked in the mirror for hours thinking, wow, I'm kind of good looking. Mike and I became friends. He even asked me how I became homeless in the first place. My parents died when I was young, I told him, and I didn't want to live in the orphanage, so I ran away. I lived on the streets ever since. Mike was the first person to ever show any sort of interest in me. It was really touching. He put one hand on my shoulder and squeezed, trying to comfort me, but it didn't work. At least he tried. Now, I spent my days painting, sculpting, or making pottery. Mike spared no expense. Business wasn't that great, but for some reason, I really expected to be making money, but we were barely making minimum wage. Mike walked in on the first of every month and handed me a lot of cash, but he looked more disappointed every month. I reassured him that I was fine and that things would get better soon, but he still left looking deflated. I would occasionally take walks around the city, visit my murals, and once I saw that there was a security guard at the first one I had ever painted. I approached to see it better and saw that it had a signature. Not just any signature. Mike's signature. What the hell? He was meant to be selling my art, not posing as me. I stormed over to Mike's apartment where he said he'd be, but when I knocked on the door, nobody answered. I waited for a long time and called Mike several times, but nothing. He showed up after about 2 hours and looked shocked to see me. He was wearing really fancy clothes, so I asked him about them. He said, "They're knockoffs. Gotta look the part in order to sell, kid." And before I could ask him about why he had signed my mural, he waved a huge wad of cash in my face, more than we had made in 2 months. Mike said, "I sold one of your sculptures to some money bags." I grabbed the money, more money than I had ever held in my hands before. I thought things were finally starting to look up. 2 months after that, I was still in the same apartment, painting, until I didn't even know what to paint anymore. And I thought my sculptures all looked the same. Also, I had spent a bunch of money on new clothes. So now my closet was full, but my stomach was empty. I waited by the window for Mike to bring me my cut of the profits. When he arrived, I noticed he slipped into the back of his car, moved around, and slipped back to the front of the car, only then coming out to give me my money. I watched him do this several times over the course of a few weeks, and then I realized what he was doing. He was changing his clothes. The last time I watched him do that, I had invited him over to eat dinner and watch a football game. But then I went outside with the excuse of needing to go buy something that I forgot. I sprinted downstairs to the parking lot and peeked inside Mike's car. There were neatly folded clothes in there, and I could see the tag of a shirt. It was a very expensive shirt, and it didn't look like a knockoff at all. It was then that I realized Mike must be scamming me. I bet he's selling the art for way more and giving me only a small percentage. I was furious. I wasn't about to be exploited by a slime ball like Mike. I looked around to make sure no one was watching, and then I used a rock from the garden to smash Mike's window. I was going to take the shirt, but I ended up taking a flyer that was next to it. The flyer was for Mike's gallery. Apparently, more like my gallery. Later, Mike was furious when he saw his car windows smashed open, but he had no way of knowing it was me. After he left, I went on another walk around the city. I would have gone directly to Mike's gallery, but the flyer didn't have an address on it, just a website that I couldn't access. It was nighttime, and I enjoyed the wind blowing through my hair. The lampposts were illuminating my path, and I again walked past loads of my murals, smiling nostalgically when I saw them. I also saw the spot where I slept my first year while being homeless. I used to snuggle up with a teddy bear behind a dumpster hidden where no one could find me. Once, a police officer found me and shined a flashlight on me, which woke me up. I ran away as fast as I could. Now it was years later, and I kind of wanted to go back there. I walked for what felt like hours, part of me trying to find that damn gallery. I was getting scammed. I was going to give up when I turned a corner, and suddenly, there it was. A glowing cube of glass filled with rich-looking people. I couldn't recognize it at first, but the closer I got, the more I recognized the paintings and sculptures as being mine. I stormed into the place and got offensive and disgusted looks from everyone around. They were all dressed to the nines, while I was wearing cargo shorts and a t-shirt. "Where's the so-called artist?" I demanded to know. From the back of the venue came Mike, wearing sunglasses, in a well-lit room, like a pretentious prick. He held 2 glasses of champagne, one in each hand, and handed one to me. "Relax, Stewart. Celebrate. We're a hit." He had the nerve to say this to me. "You mean you are a hit?" I said to him. "All of these are my art," I exclaimed. Prove it," he smirked at me. I was speechless. He had won. He had 2 guards grab me by the arms and kick me out. Damn it. What do I do now, I thought. But then a light bulb went off over my head. I ran home taking a shortcut. Now that I knew where the gallery was, it would take me no time to come back a half an hour later. I was back with 2 canvases under one arm and a toolbox full of art supplies under the other. "Mike!" I shouted. He came out of the crowd of people admiring my art and scowled. "I'm ready," I said, and the 2 guards set everything up for us. We had 2 canvases back to back so we couldn't see each other's. We had the same paint and the same amount of time to paint something as simple as a tree. I knew exactly how I wanted it, so I was more confident. I could tell Mike was pulling at his collar, panicking a little. He took off his jacket and he rolled up his sleeves. One of the guards counted down and we started the race. I could tell I was doing well because people standing behind me were gasping while people behind Mike looked confused, and some even betrayed. We spun our canvases around and revealed them to the crowd. My tree was a great representation of what my style was. It was the style which everyone in that room loved. Mike's painting looked like a unicorn threw up on it. It was an absolute disaster. The 2 bodyguards grabbed Mike by the arms as he kicked and screamed. They threw him out through the front doors. He banged on the front doors, but they locked it. Everyone crowded around me, bombarding me with questions and saying they were going to sue Mike to get their money back. And that was only the beginning. My paintings and sculptures all sold for more money than I could ever have dreamed of. I became filthy rich. Sometime later, I was living in a penthouse apartment much larger than I needed, and with all that luxury, I allowed Mike to live in the apartment I had lived in. I paid his rent every month like he paid for mine, and I did that for a while. However, I didn't change my clothes into less fancy ones. I let him see me in all my glory, dressed to the nines every day. I threw some cash at him and then drove off to a celebrity's party. Well, it seems as though Stewart wound up getting off the streets using his artistic talents, wits, and intelligence. Unfortunately, he couldn't trust Mike, who Stewart thought was his friend. Mike was indeed a scammer, but Stewart found a way to prove the work was indeed his. And at the end, even though Stewart may have become a bit showy with his wealthy lifestyle, he still paid for Mike's apartment and would give him a bit of money from time to time. How do you think Stewart dealt with his homelessness situation? Do you believe he handled it in the right way? Did Stewart prove that with hard work and good faith, one can change his or her lifestyle? Leave your comments below. Thank you to Stewart for sharing his story with us. And please remember to like and subscribe to Bibi and Yaya, where you will hear me read people's real-life personal stories and their life experiences. Also, you can read other people's comments, solutions, and opinions relating to the real-life situations which people share with us. And don't forget, if you have a personal story or issue which you would like to share with us, please send an email in the description box below. We would be happy to hear from you and offer advice on how to deal or cope with your personal experience. Also remember that your comments and opinions are welcomed. Share your thoughts and advice that you may have to those whose stories you hear. Just scroll down and leave your message. Thank you for joining us today, and see you next time here on Bibi and Yaya.